This video is going to basically go over the example that we did in class for finding the average of two numbers and learning how to write a function. The chapter in your textbook that has the notes for this is Chapter 6. Chapter 6 PowerPoints have a lot more details, and we're not really doing Chapter 6 right now. We just want to use simple functions and start to get you comfortable with what they might look like in C++. But please come here to the PowerPoints and you can toggle through and look for more details if what I say in the video does not make sense, because it will talk you through in quite a bit of detail. We've talked about, like for example, this slide. Main itself is a function. It has a return type, it has a name, it has a parameter list, and then it has a body, etc. So come back to the slides if you want some additional information at this point in time, but we will be covering it in more detail later. Coming back to the example that we did in class, there's basically kind of three things that I want to highlight or point out. And that is, when we're working with functions, you're going to have a function prototype, and that goes above main. You will have a function call somewhere in your code, and a function call is the name of the method and whatever parameters that it needs. And then you will have the function definition, which we place below main. Okay? So in this particular example, your prototype includes the return type, it includes the name, it includes the parameters. I should say parameters data type, and then followed by a semicolon. If you take a look at the slides, it will talk about a function having a header. That is this first line here. This line is the header line, and it mimics everything up here in the function prototype, except it is not followed by a semicolon, and it has the parameters data types and variable names. So when you have the header, you need to include the data type and the name of the local variables. Those variables are local only to this method or function. You will hear me interchange the words method and function. They basically mean the same thing. There is a slight difference, but we're not going to get into that right now. So if we return S1 plus S2 divided by 2, this was finding the average of two numbers is what we were doing. And so we just did our calculations, S1 plus S2 divided by 2.0, and we returned that value. When you're using a function, we want to understand how that function call works. And remember, we had calculated the average within the code, but then we decided to use a function. So what happens is, as the code is executing, it declares these variables. We assign a couple numbers to score 1 and score 2, and then we are going to have average is assigned, find average, and as soon as we say find average, the transfer of control for the code goes down here. It runs the function, it returns this value, double, and that value then comes back here and gets assigned to average. And then we can output it. This example also shows the outputting to two decimal places. Remember, to get more information on the set precision, the fixed, and the show point, etc., you want to watch the other videos on the YouTube channel. So when we executed this program, it successfully found the average of the two numbers. That was the test data that we had created in class. There is, I would rather have a little space between nums and 5.0 there. So if I go back in and add a space here, that will take care of that. The other thing that you guys should start to be getting in the habit of doing is showing me your test data before you run. So for example, in class we did test data was 3, 7, and the result that we expected was going to be 5. And I don't remember what other test data that we had, maybe something like 7, and we want to make sure that we have like an odd number. So let's go ahead and do 4. So that's going to be 11, and then our result that we would expect if we take 11 divided by 2 would be 5.5. And then we also had some test data like -2 and I think 3 we had. And we discussed that that would be appropriate test data if we were finding the averages of temperatures. And because you could have negatives. And so if I average those, I get 1 divided by 2 would be 0.5. And so you should have your test data developed before you code. And then you should run your code with a variety of those different test data. And I'm going to want to see your executions of code copied below main. So if I copy this and I do paste, then I have my results. Okay. So if I try out my other test data, because I should try out all of the test data, if we go back up here and we execute, one input was 7 and one input was 4, and we execute, do we get what is expected? We got 5.50. That is correct. I'm outputting to 2 decimal places, remember? And then the last one was -2 and 3. So if I change my data to -2 and 3 and I execute, then we should get the 0.5. And so there's my test data. So you're going to need to get in the habit of creating this test data so we can see, and then running the test data. And later on we are actually going to do what's called unit testing. So that will be a way that professionals in the industry will set up and test their programs. Actually, a lot of times they do, well, not a lot of times, but they will set up their unit tests before they code. So it's the same model that you're creating your test data before you code. That is it.